Good morning, guys. Today we're going to be going through our second lesson for human A&P, necessary life functions and homeostasis. Now, there are several necessary life functions, and just like for us to be considered living, this requires to all living things. Now, the first one is maintaining boundaries. So, the most obvious structure that we have for maintaining boundaries is going to be the skin. Now, that's actually called the integumentary system, and we have an entire chapter that will cover that. That's chapter 4. Okay, so movement. Now, I talked briefly about movement and this term locomotion. Now, locomotion refers to a change in location at the expense of energy. And movement simply refers to a change in location. So when we talk about locomotion, we commonly say that's movement, but that's us moving our bodies around from one place to another. And then the movement of substances within the body, whether that is our blood, whether that is food, all of those things. Now, responsiveness. So the ability to sense changes and react. Now, ideally, this reaction we want to be what is called the proper physiological response. So, for example, if you are cold, you want to have a physiological response to either shiver to make your body warm up or to decrease blood flow to your extremities. Now, that is a physiological response. So, putting on a jacket or going inside, standing next to a fire, those are not physiological responses. Now, digestion, this is the breakdown and absorption of nutrients. That is both our solid and liquid nutrients. That collectively is referred to as metabolism. Okay, which is right here. The chemical reactions within the body, this will both produce energy and make our body structures. Excretion, we got to get rid of what's left over. Okay, for lack of a better phrase, everybody pees and poops. If you don't, it means something's wrong with you and you should probably go see your doctor. Okay, so reproduction, every biological organism on Earth serves the primary purpose of producing offspring to ensure species survival. And finally, growth. Now, growth is in two components, both an increase in cell size and also an increase in the number of cells. So, at the moment of conception, that is the only time that you are a single cell. Shortly after that, that cell begins to divide and you become a multicellular organism until ultimately you are born and then grow into an adult and you consist of billions, if not trillions, of cells. Okay, so nutrients, again, we have to obtain these from our environment. We are heterotrophs, meaning we have to obtain food from something else. This is going to be our carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, our vitamins and minerals. Okay, so just your normal diet hopefully has a good balance of those. And finally, oxygen for our chemical reactions within the body. So we are considered aerobes. We can only survive in the presence of oxygen. Okay, water. We have to consume water, believe it or not. It accounts for 60 to 80% of our body weight, okay, our mass, and provides for metabolic reactions. So, what I tell all of my students every year is that when you eat an actual meal, let's say you go to Applebee's and you get, some quesadilla. If you want to have sweet tea or Coke or Sprite, whatever, have that before your meal. But when it comes time to actually eat your food, it's very important that you actually do that with regular water. Now, the reason being is because you need plain water to catalyze, which is part of metabolism, all of those metabolic reactions. You need it to help break down the food, both in your mouth, your stomach, and your entire digestive tract. Okay, so stable body temperature. I'm sure we've all become familiar right now with body temperature checks, but it needs to be 37 degrees Celsius. That is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And then finally, atmospheric pressure. So our bodies are designed essentially to operate best at sea level, or one atmospheric unit. You may commonly see it referred to as an AMU. When we get too much pressure, too little pressure, it causes things to go wrong within our body. Okay. Now, all of these are related. Figure 1.3 gives a very basic outline of the body. We see right here the lungs bringing oxygen in, removing CO2. So our nutrient, our waste right here, circulating that, moving it throughout our body, exchanging nutrients as well, removing the waste through our excretory system. That's going to be our kidneys and urinary bladder, the digestive system right here, moving everything through as well. Now, the next thing, homeostasis. Now, homeostasis is the maintenance of a stable internal environment. So we have this phrase, a dynamic state of equilibrium. Well, what does that actually mean? Now, when we say this normal body temperature that we just talked about of 37 degrees Celsius, our bodies are not always going to be 37 degrees Celsius straight all the time. It's not going to be a flat line of 37 degrees Celsius. It's going to go up and down, but will actually remain relatively constant. So if you recall from maybe your Algebra 2 class that you may have taken already, when you study sine and cosine waves, how they go above and below the y-axis, but they still maintain an average across the board. So this homeostasis is necessary for normal body functioning and to sustain life. Okay, so this is not only for body temperature, but it's for the acidity of your blood. It's for the amount of oxygen in your blood, or even the amount of CO2 in your blood, or the amount of water within your body. When you get dehydrated, that is a state of homeostatic imbalance. So a disturbance in homeostasis resulting in disease. Now, disease just means a movement away from homeostatic balance. So figure 1.4 outlines this. We're going to go through step by step. So we have this stimulus. This is anything that produces a change in variable. So let's say, it's summertime in Alabama. You got your AC in your mama's house set at 68. You go outside, it's 95 degrees. You sense that heat, and it's hot, and it's humid. Okay, that change is detected by a receptor. In this case, the receptor will be your skin, and you will feel that temperature change. The pupils in your eyes, if it's very bright outside, they will constrict to let in less light. At that point, the information is sent along an afferent pathway to the control center. Now, in this case, the control center is going to be your brain. You have some interneurons. That's beyond here. We'll talk about that in Chapter 7, the nervous system. And at that point, the output will be formed, and the information is sent along an efferent pathway to activate the effector. And in this case, if it's hot outside, it will be your skin. It will begin to sweat, and it will do that to try and cool the body off and get us back to this normal body temperature. Now, if you aren't able to do that, your body temperature will continue to climb until eventually some bad things will happen. And ultimately, if your body temperature cannot decrease, then it will actually cause death. Okay, so the body communicates through both neural and hormonal control systems. So the receptor that we talked about will respond to changes in the environment. That's our stimulus, and then send that information to the control center, which will determine a set point, determine whether it's right, whether it's above, below, analyze that, and then determine the appropriate physiological response, and then send it along an efferent pathway to create a proper response for the stimulus. Okay, so we have two types of feedback mechanisms. We have negative feedback. This is going to be most of our homeostatic control mechanisms. It's going to shut off that original stimulus, reduce its intensity. It works like a household thermostat. So you set your house thermostat at 68 in the summertime. Now, when that temperature in your house gets above 68, the air conditioner turns on, tries to bring the house temperature back to 68. Once it reaches there, it turns off. The opposite in the winter. You set it at 72 in the winter. When it gets colder than that, it will turn the heat on, warm your house up to 72, and then turn off. Okay, now positive feedback. These are very few within the body. In fact, there's only two, and this is going to increase the original stimulus to push the variable further. So this occurs in blood clotting. Without the positive feedback mechanisms there, the body would not be able to clot blood. There are some disorders that we'll talk about in Chapter 10 that create issues with these, and also in the birth of the baby. Now, birthing a baby physiologically is the most painful experience that a human can go through, aside from being burned alive. And we need that positive feedback to allow the mother to continue pushing against that overwhelming pain stimulus. Without it, the baby would not be able to be pushed out and would be caught in the birth canal. So if you have any questions, you can post in the comments below. You can send me an email to mr.tucker.schs@gmail.com.